afternoon, everybody. Whoops. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on practical solutions for mental health at work, covering wellbeing. So this is a disability confident webinar, part of the series that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. And today's focus is on mental health and wellbeing at work. What I would like to suggest is that if you've got, if you need to see captioning, there is a closed caption button on here. We do record all of these sessions and we send them out at the end of the session within 2 or 3 days. So it'll be next week sometime, along with the resources. But if you have any specific questions, if you want us to introduce you to any of our panelists direct, we're more than happy to do that. So we wanted to talk about what is basically the biggest cause of absence in the workplace. And we're going to explore practical solutions, bust some myths, and look at some I can never say this word, some new support models. So I wanted just to kind of touch and set the scene, if you like. If you look at the global mental health issue, the actual mental health issues as the broadest banner, costs, well, in working days, annually, it's about 12 billion. And that's billion. That's a big number, working days. And in US dollars, that equates to around $1 trillion a year. This is annually. And in the UK alone, the cost to employers from mental health absence, or I'd like to say mental ill health, is estimated at about 51 billion, which is still a huge number. And the interesting thing for me when I did some research on this is that the comparisons over time, so sick days have risen from 3.7 and they're now up at 6.7. And that really shows that this isn't a static problem, it's getting worse. So what I've got today is some fantastic people who are going to share their knowledge with you. And hopefully, if one or two of you take it on board and you implement it in your own companies, it will make a huge difference. So we've got here Martin Jervis from Thrive, which is a leading digital mental health platform. We have Allie Knowles, who works as the founder of Ollie and his Superpowers, which is for juniors, and also of Subconquest, which is for adults, which very much focuses on resilience and emotional well-being. And Abigail Tennant from Microlink, a new joiner to us, and we're thrilled to have her, bringing insight into the neurodiversity and workplace support. I also have my very glamorous assistant, Kim, who's going to help me with questions. So if you've got any Q&A, please feel free. Please enter questions or thoughts or queries, whatever, into the chat. If it's a specific question, use the Q&A, and that'd be wonderful. So let's get started, and let's start broad, because there's still so many myths around mental health at work. Martin, Ali, and Abigail, which ones do you hear most often, and how do we challenge them? Who'd like to start? Martin.
Yeah, I was going to say ladies first because I'm old-fashioned like that. But okay, I'll jump in.
Lovely.
So firstly, thanks for the intro, the fabulous scene set, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to meet with everybody and find that so many people are interested in this very important topic. I think there are a lot of myths around mental health care in the workplace. I'll just throw a couple out. One is that people talk about the benefits trap. Everybody knows about the benefits trap. Now, I pinch that term and I bring it into the workplace. Mental health support is not a benefit. And if it's regarded as a reward or a benefit, it's probably in the wrong place. So for me, it's a real myth to say that you've got a benefit, which is access to some sort of mental health support. It's not a benefit. It's basically something that you will do for economic reasons, as you've just outlined, and also because it's the right thing to do for people's health. So I'll leave my second one, just throw that one out there. That's a really important thing.
It's quite a stark one, isn't it, as well? Because as soon as you said it, I thought, well, actually, we do always talk about them as being benefits within the workplace, instead of the benefit is to the employer that we stay fit and healthy and able to produce whatever it is we're producing for them. Interesting. Abigail.
I don't know if Ali wanted to go, because I know you were going to jump in and I don't want you to forget where you were. You good. I think one thing that I often hear is, are you really? Are you really
are you
having
really?
challenges with your
Right.
mental health? Or that kind of cynical approach to, oh, here we go, as like it's an excuse because you can't physically see it. So I think that tends to be something that's misunderstood. And I think because of the way society talks about it as well, lots of people jump onto it like, oh yeah, we've all got really bad anxiety. But actually, if you go to somebody who's really suffering badly with anxiety, for example, it's not just a case of something that you'll have for a couple of hours while you're in the moment. It's something that does actually last for quite some
It
time.
impacts a lot, doesn't
So
it?
it's thinking about that aspect.
Thank you. And Ali.
I hate the word mental health.
Okay, what are we using instead?
In our work, we use emotional well-being.
Okay, why's that?
Because the stigma, mental health. I've got a mental health problem. I think it blocks people that genuinely are struggling coming forward. Who wants that people? And it's not an illness. It's a state of being at a given point in time. So it doesn't need curing. It doesn't need fixing. And it's not an illness and it's not contagious.
Are you sure it's not caused by paracetamol though, Ali?
I'm pretty certain it is, as is everything else. And I avoid it at all
Fair
costs.
enough. Fair enough. But that's a really interesting point in itself. If we were to just change that labeling, and what was your phrase again?
I call it emotional well-being. I think more people will come forward, and we've had debates on this because people are silly enough to invite me to panels, and about men's mental health, and they were like, well, we'd rather have mental health than emotional well-being because they didn't like the word emotional well-being. And I thought, you know, if the block to us talking about this is what we call it,
Yeah,
we've got a real problem, haven't we?
Can I just give you a little perspective on that,
please.
if I may? So when I joined, I did some strategy work with Thrive before I joined. And one of the first things I thought is that the C-suite, the budget holders, don't buy into well-being. So why are we called Thrive Mental Wellbeing? And in fact, the joint venture that we set up in Australia started as Thrive Mental Health 3 years ago, straight out of the box. And we've just changed the website to be on to mental health, because mental health, we find people will pay for a budget. Emotional well-being, they will not. But we've pivoted in implementation, and we just talk about emotional well-being because nobody wants to put their hand up and say they have an issue with mental health. So we use them in different contexts. We talk about the mental health challenge in order to get people to budget for it, but we absolutely, to get people to positively engage, exactly as Abby said, we will talk about emotional well-being. So we do both depending on the context.
Interesting. So Martin, can you tell me a bit about the app Thrive? I really like it. I've seen it used in a number of different contexts and businesses, but how does Thrive actually work, and what made you want to build it?
Well, so it was built by Dr. Fonseca, who's a psychiatrist, and Dr. Huxley, who's a clinical consultant psychologist. And they ran mental health institutions, and still do run institutions where people are detained under the Mental Health Act. And they said, we're seeing people too late in this process. We're seeing people where they're medicated, sometimes they're detained under the Act. And if we just saw people earlier in the process, if there was a way of detecting and engaging and giving people what they need, some people would not then go on this path towards economic damage and, of course, damage to their lives and that of their loved ones. So that's the answer to the second half of the question. Very quickly, the Thrive service, the app is only the gateway. And we have learned that people don't use mental health apps, or they do. 10.4% of people will use them, but it's only the well. Okay, and it turns out it's the wealthy well. So that's not where the problem is. Okay, that doesn't really hit this spot. So what we really use, because of this stigma, people won't go and use the content. If they go and use the content in the app, it will make them better. But the big thing we've done is we've put the GAD and PHQ questionnaires by which the NHS determines on these clinical scales whether you have an anxiety or depression issue or not. And then we've put that in something that you can use in a maximum of 3 or 4 minutes, totally privately and confidentially. And that means that people will take that test regularly. So we get to the 16% of people minimum in the workplace with a mental health issue at any moment in time, because they'll actually take the test. Then we reach out to them instead of asking them to go and get help. And Mental Health England will tell you only 12% of people would get help. We reach out to them within 3 minutes. That means we're safeguarding them, very rarely calling a blue light service, but we safeguard them. But it also means 91 to 92% of people go forward to the next step, which is a full assessment with the human being, because we manage them in the moment. We then have a 1-hour assessment, and if required, they have an uncapped course of therapy. And that means 86% of them recover. So we get more people engaged in it because it's a safe place to take a little test. We then, if you've got an issue, have 92% of people in help-seeking behaviour and 86% of them recover. So it's the overall cumulative effect of those things that makes the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Wonderful. And actually, it ties in with Ali. You've done quite a lot of work with the NHS with your Ollie coaches. And I thought the report back from that, I can't remember the name of the trust. It keeps escaping me. Was it Coventry?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
Coventry.
yay.
So well done, yeah.
Tell me a bit about that.
We were asked to. I think it was, forgive me for this, a bit of a lip service thing. There was some spare cash. Let's try something outside the standard CPT CAMH stuff.
Yeah.
Let's try Ollie because it's making a lot of noise and getting bigger. We were invited along, and quite honestly, the remit I had was, we're going to give you a set number of youngsters with low-level mental health issues based on a GAD chart that you were just talking about. It's, in my opinion, can't fill in, but that's by the by. I think we're on the same page, but coming in from a different angle. And they said, we'll give you 12 weeks, see if you can make any difference. After 6, those children didn't need us. Were they healed, fixed? I hate that, no. Were they beginning to take forward the learning so they didn't need us? Absolutely. So because they'd already paid us a heap of money, they decided they'd throw a load more at us. And they threw suicides, transitions, rape, everything.
Oh, gosh.
And again, within 6 to 8 sessions, cured, healed, hate that. Nobody needs curing or healing. They need empowering, and they need knowledge in a language they understand. All of them except for one, I'm still working with, because he's going through transition. It's going to take a while. I thought that because we had no re-referrals, and obviously they checked in on all these clients, they're all doing brilliantly at uni, they're doing everything they wanted to do. It was a complete success, which I knew it would be.
It's astonishing.
It's simple. It's got too damn complicated. I thought, that's it. We'll go and hit the NHS and say, look, we can save you a fortune.
Yeah.
No. What did
reduce waiting lists, get people back into productivity as a child.
Mental health nurses into most of our practices, which is good, right? First trained. It's a triage. And pretty much you go to a GP, he'll put you on the list. But instead of waiting months to see a traditional therapist, you see a mental health nurse. So you feel better that it's moving, but all she does is put you back on the list. So that was a bit of a letdown. At that point, I thought, there is absolutely no point us trying to change things that are set in stone and have no intentions of changing. So I went back to the only thing I know, which is find the people that need us and do it that way and build up our reputation. Keep it simple. We're not clinical psychologists. You just use words, Martin, there that I couldn't even pronounce, let alone spell, because what we've found is another point of access problem is it's too complicated. The measurement systems are, do you have a mental health problem? Fill this for me. No offense, guys. See a clinical, it's scary. I think the reason that we've done as well as we have is we've made it so damn simple and empowering. And back to what Martin was saying, we've got to get to them sooner. I agree. But I think we need to get them sooner than that. So we get to the kids, because if we can give the kids the mental resilience to deal with whatever life throws at them, they're the next set of parents and we stop the rot.
Are there any things that you don't cover under Ollie?
Yeah, we're not clinical psychologists, so we don't do the white coat stuff, as I call it. So anything that needs diagnosis, we can't diagnose. Bipolar, schizophrenia, the big stuff. But most people, when you really drill down, it's an emotional well-being issue. It's a belief, it's an emotion that's attached to an event that is now colouring how they're managing their world and who they are on it. If you can change that, like the brilliant example, and shut me up, you got me on one. This is a pen, right? I do not have anxiety about this pen because it never hurt me.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But something else might have done. So then I'll have anxiety specifically about that. So my anxiety, I'm not anxious. I'm anxious about certain things. And that's what we work on.
Interesting. But it's identifying those things and then almost dismantling that fear around that particular
And you
item.
need a simple language to allow people to do that, but then don't fix them, don't tell them. Give
Yeah,
them tools to let them work it out.
that's wonderful.
No.
I mean, the thing that comes through talking to both of you, and certainly when Abigail has a conversation in a minute, is around it is simple, but it is that early intervention, and it is being open and honest about it, because I don't have the specific data. I couldn't find it before this meeting. With the CIPD, we're talking about the lack of people engaging with EAPs. It's something like 80% of people never do more than the first 2 sessions. So actually, if you as a manager, a line manager or a director of a team or whatever you might do, if you've got a responsibility for other folk in your team, please don't think if you've sent them off to do, some free telephone calls sessions with somebody, it's really not going to help. Invariably, with the best will in the world, they're run by charities that have people who have no experience or knowledge. They're good listeners. And I mean, I've been through this. I'm quite open about it. A couple of times in life, there have been some wowzers where everything conflates at the same time, as it invariably does, and you're less able to cope with that. And I've gone through some free services, and it really hasn't helped me in any way, shape, or form. Great. I had a lovely cry for an hour, had the coach in tears, but actually I came away from there and just continued in the behavior that I'd been doing before. So from first-hand experience and from what you guys are talking about here, it's really important to have that one-on-one understanding. And I love that people have got that unlimited, Martin, with the Thrive. I think that's a really key thing, that you don't just shut and stop the water coming through and go, nah, that's it. You're golden. Off you go, mate. But Abigail, do you find, if I can come on to you too, how does this get conflated, mixed up with, caused by a result of, we're talking about the intersectionality of mental ill health, if I can use that phrase for the time being, and neurodivergence? Do they always go hand in hand?
I think there's lots of studies that are saying that there is a high probability that individuals who are neurodivergent will experience one or more types of mental well-being challenges. We'll go down that route. I myself, I've got ADHD and I'm dyslexia. You may see me moving around. I'm also playing with a ball. Keeps me on point, especially when I'm doing sessions like this. And mental health has always been something that I've really, really struggled to keep on top of, but never really understood why. I could never get on top of it. And I think it speaks a lot to what Ali was saying, is that we don't often have the conversation piece to understand what the cause of how you're feeling, what that feeling means to you as an individual, and then what that support could be to alleviate that feeling for you as an individual. So I've had lots of coaching, lots of different therapies. Some different therapists work for me, some don't. It felt like a lot of the time I was just talking to them and I'm just saying everything again and again, but I'm not actually moving past where I need to. And they're very box standard responses sometimes. But I think sometimes even getting access can be really frustrating, especially if you're neurodivergent and you're trying to access support. What's the right support? Filling in forms, the waiting list, that kind of aggravation that comes with it as well. And then you kind of just seep into it, and then you might go to the doctors and they say, anxiety and depression, here's some medication, that'll help. And at the time, I didn't realize. So I was like, right, okay, if it's going to help me, I need something, because I was at literal breaking point at that point. And then it numbed me. And I was like, oh, I don't like not feeling me anymore. I remember being at my auntie's funeral, and I'm a highly emotive person. So if you can imagine, I'm now not crying.
Oh, crikey.
It was such a surreal experience that I then at that point said, no, I need to come off it. But it wasn't until later in life, when I got diagnosed with ADHD, that I was like, okay, now I know why I could never get a handle on it, because I didn't understand what was causing the challenges that were impacting my mental health.
Yeah.
And now that I've done that, and now that I've been a coach for individuals, and strangely coaching myself as I've coached individuals as well, because we often don't take our own advice because the world goes so fast and we forget to have those regular check-ins with ourselves. But I do think it's that education piece that is highly missing. And I do agree, we need to support kids so much. But then we've still got adults that need to understand how to support their kids, and we need teachers to understand and workplaces to understand that
It's
as
everything.
parents,
It is everything, for sure.
we're not only dealing with work and our own stresses, but sometimes we're dealing with having to look after our children and the stresses that can bring alongside it as well. So I think there's a big role that workplaces do need to play, and I agree that the EAP is always just a quick fix, or that fruit bowl,
It's like a sticking
Fruit Friday.
Yeah, yes. Mind you, I quite
Really?
like a Fruit Friday, I'll be honest with you. I
Or
quite
is
like a
it
fruit
this
piece of
new
food.
one? It's goat yoga, I think. I couldn't think of anything worse, but it's
Goat yoga.
places seem to just put standard things into
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
But is it working for the people that you currently
Yeah.
have? And I feel from a workplace perspective, that conversation and psychological safety with managers, that's a big point where you can start getting a lot of that support implemented.
Yeah.
Because if you don't feel like you can talk to somebody, that's so much that you're going to have to hone in on. And these different communication barriers that we can have, I think we need to be a bit more curious and less assumptive as to why we think somebody might be experiencing something, and really understand their journey. But that's my ADHD kicking in. I'm going to stop talking now.
No, I really like that. And obviously that resonated with you, Ali.
Yeah, there was a couple of things. We've recently been parachuted into the EAP world, so I feel I do need to say something on that.
Oh, please, yeah.
80% I agree with what you're saying, from what I've seen. But there are EAP companies that we've now aligned with, and only because they recognise exactly what you're all saying, that it was a tick box, that it was, aren't we nice? There you go.
Nice.
And they're doing something about it, and we're part of that movement to change that. So yeah, there's work that needs doing there, but I do feel that I need to say that they are looking at it. Not all of them, but some.
Well, I love the fact
ones
they're
are.
even thinking about going on that journey, because it
Well,
always seemed to be set in stone.
Tracey, you know us, we would not be involved if they weren't.
Absolutely.
We don't do tick box. And I think one of the problems there is that EAPs have a tax thing, so it's a benefit in kind. You can't actually use that mental health benefit to help your children. And the reality is an awful lot of people, I've just been asked who they are. I'll inbox it later because I don't want to offend the rest of them.
We don't mind offending the rest. It's not. It's a sharing of knowledge. This is a
I'm
safe
quite
space.
happy to defend, but I'm also quite happy to say
Fair enough. No. That's absolutely fair.
But
And
the issue that they've got is that they can't give support to the children. And you're absolutely right what you said, Abigail. We don't just work with the child. When we got into this, we used to go into a therapy room with a child, and the child would feel better, aren't we good? Then the classroom, and nobody knew anything about it. But the reality is a child's reacting to their environment. Their environment is school. It is home. So you need to engage everybody, but you need to do it without pointing the finger and saying you buggered up, because they didn't. They're doing the best they can with the lack of information they had. So we just need to shape the whole damn thing up, and it's not hard to do, and it's not complicated.
Well, I love that enthusiasm. Martin, so in your view, what does a proactive approach to mental health, if we're parking the EAP for one moment, forgive us EAP people, let's park you for a moment, what is the proactive approach to mental health look like in an organisation, large and small?
And so just to declare an interest here, so we work with EAPs, but we were actually partners when I joined with a very large EAP, and clearly there was no values alignment. So we collectively terminated that partnership, and I'm sure that organisation will end up focusing on doing a better job, because as a whole they are absolutely as was just said, that they're working on trying to do a better job, and there's some very cool stuff going on there. And it's great to hear they're extending to doing meaningful work with children. So that's fabulous. But to answer your question, so our proactive approach, I think, firstly, it's about an organisation, because we work mostly through employers. We'd love to work with the NHS, but I think that was probably the biggest myth that was just revealed there, that if you do a great piece of work in the NHS and it's fantastic, that everybody will pick it up. And sadly, they won't. And that's why, you know, we have, our founders were from the NHS, but we've ended up going a different route via the employer route. So my answer is contextualized for the workplace, but it's firstly to recognise the amount of unmet need. Okay, regardless of how many people are engaging, the stats are it is 1 in 6 at any moment in time in the workplace. Okay, and that's been the stat for a long, long time. So that's,
can I just break that down a tiny bit? Sorry to interrupt, but 1 in 6, what? 1 in 6 is sobbing quietly in the corner, is off work. What does that refer to?
Would pass the threshold in the GAD and PHQ tests for having a mental.
Now this is like the 10 questions, isn't it? Have you felt really depressed in the last 10 days? Have you felt like committing suicide? Is it that list you're referring to?
Yes, there is a couple of lists.
Okay.
And we've put that.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
That's okay. Well, what we've done, just the earlier point, is we've put it into simple language, further point, and it's done in an engaging form, and it's still clinically valid. So that's what we've done. But that 1 in 6 figure, I'm happy to provide 3 or 4 different sources that all point to the same answer.
I've heard the same from BDF as 1 in 5, but I was just curious what that actual one person,
it's people
how
that
it was
need
represented.
Help. Okay. Again, we have a lot of debate on how many are preclinical and how many are subclinical, but that's what in our world we would call clinical. And I'm out of my depth having a clinical discussion on that, but I'll bring Dr. Fonseca if required. But so the first thing is recognizing that getting to 16% of people in the workforce, we know, for example, from our own data in hospitality, it's nearer 52%. Okay, it's a horrific number in that, but let's assume it's 16%. So the fact that there is unmet need is the first stage of having a proactive approach. Then doing whatever you can to destigmatize it. Having this anonymous way of accessing our app completely helps in that. Okay. But anything you can do in the workplace to destigmatize it. Mind announced at the end of last year that stigma is getting worse, unfortunately. Inform and educate as ever, and that's the longest battle that we have. There's no quick fixes here. Resource it appropriately, whatever is appropriate for your workplace, and that's where there will be all sorts of different solutions and different budgets and different things that people can do. Sure. And then, of course, last but by no means least, have the right role modeling and processes that support that. So leadership that are prepared to admit their vulnerabilities. And then our favourite bugbear is, okay, so you've got Thrive, you've got all this stuff. Would you let people have time off work for a GP appointment? Yes. Will you let them have time off work for an appointment with a therapist from Thrive? No. Okay, so your process is different to what you say. So those are the sorts of things that really help get a
So it's consistency across the piece. Being very outspoken about it, about your support of individuals. I mean, we had a question on here where somebody said if an EAP mental health service isn't perhaps doing what you need it to do, what can businesses do? And I think, Martin, you've covered quite a lot of things there. I would urge you all to have a look at Thrive. It might not suit everybody. You might not like the process, but I found it personally very simple and straightforward. And I've audited many different companies for disability confident leaders who work with us on these webinars. And the majority of them do actually use that. And that included some really big government departments. And knowing what I know about government departments, I was quite surprised to see you there and embedded, but it was very, very positive. Abigail, we talked subclinical and clinical. We have a whole wonderful new team of coaches, which we're truly excited about. Some have got a specialism within the mental health space. Do we get involved in that clinical, non-clinical, sub whatever thingy bob? Sorry, Martin.
I think because we work with individuals, not so much, because we're trying to keep that language quite clean, and make sure that we are doing what we were talking about. So thinking about what are the challenges, but getting sometimes a bit deeper as to why they're a challenge, not just what the challenge is, but what's that kind of the cause behind it, so then you can get a bit deeper into what that support could look like. And we're really fortunate to have established a team now where we can work with individuals on a one-to-one basis and really provide lots of skills, resources, techniques, that people and strategies that people can put into place and practice, and then come back and speak with their coach and see how they're getting on, and do we need to tweak them, because sometimes it's good to also know what's not working as well as what is working, because then you can try and find what works for you as an individual. And I think that's where our coaches are really skilled at doing that, and in such a small period of time as well. Because for me as a coach, I've always felt I never want somebody to have to always keep coming back to me. So it leads back to what Ali was saying about that empowerment piece. So I always refer to myself as an empowerment coach, because I want to give people the skills. And again, what Ali was saying about that kind of, when you're talking to somebody and helping them find their narrative as opposed to telling them what that could be, there's a lot more buy-in from individuals, and they're more likely to go on and do something with that. So it's really good that we have this amazing team, and then that education piece from us as well, to be able to get out there and start promoting this education and how people can, I always say, tweak mindsets. I never want to change people in any way, but tweak mindsets, and sometimes give people that second pause to think, oh, hang on a second, maybe this is not how I thought it was, and that there could be something else at play.
I love that.
Because I think
one of the things I've found, I think it's great, because when I talk to the team, which I might do on a weekly basis, to just have even that 1 minute conversation where somebody holds the mirror up to me and goes, have you thought about trying that? And I'm like, no, I actually never had. And I go away and implement it. And it's really nice to then have time to reflect and come back. We did have a question, I think it has been answered, but there was a colleague on here, Paul, was asking a question about how you get your group HR to actually look at this as a company-wide thing. How do you get them to involve it and go out and spend money on it? Ali, do you have much success with company-wide?
Yeah. It's, again, we're going to go back over the old ground, but it's the same. It's about how you communicate it and whether or not it's being brought in from the top. So a lot of the work that we do, whether it's an EPA or we're going directly, is we actually ask the company to put the money where their mouth is. So you have this provision, you are talking about making the environment better for diverse people, neurodiverse people, for mental illness and all of that, and you've done this little bit over here. How about actually letting your employees choose? How about giving them an array of options and letting them choose what would best suit them?
Wow, that's a bit radical, isn't it?
Yeah, but
how are they going to control the spend?
We did it the other day. Well, they control the spend. We were invited to speak to 30 of some seriously large organisations in the UK, seriously large. And I think there were 3 or 4 of us that had been drilled down, selected. So we were there for children and families, mental health. Someone else was there for the clinical. Somebody else was there for this. Somebody else. I don't think they needed all of us, to be honest. That's another thing. It's too segmented, isn't it? Where you need to be a specialist. You need to be a specialist. No, you need to be a human being with an understanding. And we all got just to say where we're coming from, a bit like this, why we're doing what we're doing. And it was left to the employees then to choose who, if they only had so much budget and they could only, who would be best, but not just for themselves, who would be best for their fellow employees. So the guy over there that's neurodiverse, the guy over there that's disabled, the person over there that's transitioning, who would be best? And it didn't come down to a particular model, which was good, and I hoped it would go that way. It came down to who made them truly believe that what matters is that they're individuals, not a bloody label, because it's the individual that it's working with, not the label. So it can be done. I mean, everyone's saying, well, we can't, or it's complicated. No, it can. You just need to have the will to do it, and to shout from the rooftops, it needs changing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree, but we get these arguments time and time again. and it's the most common thing that I've seen in these webinars, is how do I get my employer to do X, Y, Z? And I mean, if we can get the basics of well-being and emotional well-being straight, then it doesn't make that blind person suddenly be able to see again. However, it takes away perhaps one of the challenges that they've got around their work. And then you work with us to remove the other barriers that you might face due to your visual impairment. But it's that intersectional and holistic piece and treating people as individuals.
And one of the things, just to come back in there,
Please.
I'm neurodiverse, okay? So the guys around me have to make adjustments. They don't have to.
Yeah.
They don't. And we can bang heads and it can be very uncomfortable. They have to make adjustments for me because it's politically correct, isn't it? It's the right thing to do. But the reality is I need to make adjustments for them too. I am capable of realizing that actually my behavior might be a little bit offensive. I am capable of that. Can I control it? Sometimes. But if I can, sometimes I should. So I think it's a two-way street. And
we all have an accountability and a responsibility.
Yeah, if we just say we've all got to move to this group, we're going to have a riot. We move together like water.
Yeah. Well, we've got a question on here that I don't know who would like to answer, but about a lack of EAP and mental health first aider support for racial harm in the workplace. So does anyone have a view on how companies can address this?
I think, again, it's down to who the EAP, if we're going to hit EAPs again, is having as their go-to clinical whatevers or therapists. And again, it's down to get an organisation in that doesn't judge, doesn't have biases, doesn't care if you're black, white, straight, gay, from Mars, doesn't give a monkeys, right? It's you as an individual. I cleaned that up, yeah?
Thank you.
Individual. And unless the EAP has that organisation, I think they're answerable. And I think the employees should be asking those questions.
Yeah. When you talk about asking questions, sorry, Martin, carry on.
I was just building on that, because there's a couple of things here. And just back to the last question, because I'm conscious that I'm surrounded by people who are really good at talking to people individually, and that it's wonderful to listen to. That's not really my gig, and therefore I do use different language, because I repeat the point at the beginning, and so we would never talk about subclinical or preclinical or any of that stuff in a setting other than trying to get people to understand the unmet need who are budget holders. So, but that is my job, is to try and find enough people that will fund this at scale in the right way. So this whole issue of how you make an argument, as an HR person to get something, to actually get somebody to sign off on this, is the world that I live in, because there is so much fabulous stuff out there. But then if you can get past that bit, that's the last question. Getting to this one, the key to our process is that we can get people engaged in the app that says they've got some sort of issue, and then because we reach out to them in real time, we safeguard them. But it is then that 1 hour assessment that typically we work with something, again, none of this is jargon, comes from the NHS, a shared care protocol. But what we're able to do in there is two things. One is we look at everybody as an individual. We don't tell them the answer is anything to do with our app and the content in that or anything else. We look at them entirely as an individual. It's just the same as when I chaired in the hospice. They weren't a patient anymore. The person that comes in is a human being. So we look at them in the round. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that every organisation we work with has appropriate resources. They've sometimes got lots of extra resources. So having created that trusted relationship in that first session, we may send them through to our therapist, but we might send them through to Ali's service. We might send them through to an EAP. We might send them through to somebody in financial wellbeing as well, as long as there's not too much of a day, because that eats into the 1 hour assessment. But we're constantly looking at more efficient ways to do that so that they can actually get access to the right resources for them, because so many employers do have these things and they're frustrated, they're underused. So if we demonstrate more that we can use the existing resources as an organisation, as a community, then your HR manager and all the rest of the people involved in wellbeing people go, actually, you're actually starting to use the stuff we've got. All right, we'll do more of it. So sorry to conflate two questions.
No. I mean, that's interesting, Martin, because one of the things that we do at Microlink when we work with a business, we do lots of retail. So we do lots of ad hoc one-offs. But when we're actually contracting with a client, one of the things we do look at is the internal resources and signpost to the internal resources. Because if it's something that we're not specialists in and we're disability and everything to do with disability, but if it comes across as financial that they've got worries about, we're not going to even try and attempt that. It would be foolish. It's not our bag. But we do have to know what the companies do around that so we can sufficiently point them in the right direction, in the right swim lane.
Yeah, and when we track all the factors that have come with that, we often find that the stress or anxiety and depression has been initiated in some way, particularly in retail, by financial wellbeing. So we will very often refer currently elsewhere. Sorry, I interrupted.
So no, not at all. No, but looking ahead, what role do you see digital mental health solutions playing in the workplace culture beyond being perhaps a bolt-on? Do you see them being more integrated into, I don't know, people's teams? Like we've got great products like CogMap and Bright Day, for example, which are on teams for all of Microlink staff. So do you see that the product would be more integrated?
Well, there is a strong argument for it, but it does damage the confidentiality, which is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
So again, we have customers that want us to use single sign-on, so they sign on to the Thrive in the same way as everything else. You do not get the degree of take-up. So if you don't get people engaged in the discussion in the first place, but alongside their MHFAs and training their managers and all the rest of it, what we're able to do is get them engaged, because all you need is an access code and your personal email.
Yeah.
Okay. So that removes the friction. It removes the questions and the worries about it's integrated, it's in Teams, it's in WhatsApp. We can do all of that, but the best deployments are when we don't.
That makes sense. But I mean, there was somebody recently, and I'm not going to mention who the company is, but had been investigated for just that, where an employer had been listening in on the calls, which actually staggered me beyond belief when I read it. But I'm assuming it happens. So, Abigail, when you're talking to colleagues, at what point do you, I don't know, say that, look, there's a wider challenge here. There's obviously something that your company needs to be doing differently. You're not alone in the way that you're feeling about this particular, whatever it might be within an employer. And where does the responsibility then lie? Are you looking at colleagues to go back to employers? How does that work?
It's a little bit of both. So if an individual has come to us through an organisation, then we would see if there is room for the individual to maybe speak to their organisation. Depends how big it is as to who you would go to. Often you would like to think it's your line manager who's your first point of call, but generally line managers heavily rely on HR, and there's not as many HR generally as there is line managers. So there needs to be clear communication from within organisations, but that's why I like being a consultant, so that we can go into organisations and say, let's take a look and see where we can help you with this, relieve some of that burden, give our guidance and expertise from that perspective. I think, and I kind of come back to it a lot, it is that open relationship, and I like the idea of being able to do something confidential, but actually a workplace could benefit from knowing what's happening from an individual's perspective, so that they can have that understanding and that they can maybe put some of those adaptations in place for individuals. But again, that then goes back to an organisation allowing people to have that little bit of flexibility to have the conversations about workload, because there's a really good Mental Health UK did a burnout report. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but it's a really good resource actually. And having suffered from burnout myself, as a neurodivergent individual as well, seeing it from that different perspective, we need to be more aware about having these conversations. And I think it goes back to that stigma point, where if we continue to keep avoiding it, then nothing's going to move forward with that conversation. And as somebody who's had challenges with their mental health, I would actually say suffered with my mental health, it's hard to have that conversation because not many people are having it. So how do I put myself out there and be really vulnerable? And once you've said it, it's out there. You cannot take that
it's
back.
out the box. And actually, Abigail, you've taken it a step further with that, and you've actually written a book, which is on Amazon. We will provide you all with the link, because you really put it out there.
Yeah, it's to my disbelief in a sense. I mean, who writes a book and then thinks, oh yeah, no one's going to read it? I mean, that's the whole point of writing a book, right? But it was because I'd gone through that, and my premises was, this was awful. I really hope nobody else has to go through this. But then the more work I was doing in the mental health space, the more I was really realizing people do. And the same as my work as a coach, when I'm speaking to individuals and have this really innate ability to get people to very much open up and tell me stuff they've never told anybody ever. And for me to just resonate with them and say, that's okay. Like, you're not alone in this, really makes me sad that we can't have more open conversations. And I think it's learning how to have those better conversations is one way we're going to make this difference. And I say that especially from my kids' perspective with their mental health challenges, being a single mum and them having to see me go through a really bad breakdown, and try and build that back up again and start building their resilience. And when they have a moment, to be able to come to me and have that conversation. And actually, I had my daughter go through therapy not too long ago, and the therapist rang me and was like, gosh, she was really good at like this reflective practice and things. And I was
That's
like,
wonderful.
yes, because that's what we do. And that's how I help her. And I was hoping that you'd just be somebody that's not me. Because sometimes you can overthink things. And I think it's the same from a workplace perspective. I think sometimes they overthink it and they throw everything out there. And then it becomes really complicated and you don't know what to use, how to use it, how to access it. And then I think that's where sometimes that challenge can kick in. But I think from a conversational perspective, that's where, in what I've done in the past, how I've seen the biggest difference is that aha moment of, oh, take a step back and have a look at things first and then act. Rather than always trying to do everything super fast.
Always good advice, and I love that. Lots of nodding heads. We've got a question on here, and I have to confess, I still haven't switched over to a large screen. And those of you that know me know I'm actually losing the sight in one of my eyes, and reading the questions is a bit of a challenge. So I've got a little magnifying glass here, which is very low tech, but it does work. We've got somebody called Shelton who's asked, could we please clarify who may be classed as frontline workers by Microlink? Does this include non-NHS social care? Absolutely. Anybody who wants to come and talk to us at Microlink, anybody who needs help and support, we generally go through an employer, but we do have web pages which have assessments, coaching and things that you can buy directly if you're an individual. And certainly anybody who wants to introduce their employer to us. We're known to a lot of the NHS, but we have the same challenges that that I'm so sorry that Ali and Martin have, insofar as if they know it works in one particular area, they either hold on to it and don't share that because it's their own little personal secret, or it just gets lost in the whole buying process because the NHS is such a large organisation. So what I wanted to do is, we've got a short amount of time left. I wanted to just check what we've done. I'm going to check my list of questions that I've asked everybody to make sure that I've got everything in here. Something very practical. Okay, how managers, line managers, how can they spot the early signs of distress and respond in a supportive way? Ali? So what's the practical? How are they going to spot it? Is it the person coming in with a nervous twitch? Is it somebody coming in late? Somebody perhaps not washing?
It's really not that simple. I wish it was. If we had employers that recognised the cost savings, because let's be honest, that's what they care about, not your
huge cost saving. Yeah, absolutely.
Then they would implement everything we're talking about here, which is very simplistic, I know, but sometimes that's the way. And then you'd have line managers whose part of their role wouldn't be just productivity. It would actually be noticing that somebody is maybe not done their hair this morning. Maybe their tie's not quite right. There's something slightly different. And it might be nothing. They might have had a rough night. Yeah.
Mm.
But if it's the same for a couple of days or they're a bit withdrawn, something's different. But you're only going to notice that if you actually buy in and notice your team. And you're only going to do that if you actually have as part of your role that you actually care about your team as human beings rather than something that makes you money. Again, it's doable. It's just education. And the way we do it is to show employers that they can save a fortune if they've got a happy team.
And I completely 100% agree with that. But how does the manager say it? Martin, I've turned up late the last 3 days and I look like a bag of crap.
Now, I'm going to pass on that one. I would ask one of the rest of the people in my team. You've got much better people on the panel to answer that one. And I agree with every
Abigail?
single syllable of what was just said, by the way. So thank you.
Thank you, Martin. What are you going to do with me? What's happening?
Sack you. No, I'm joking. And I think it is very much, my honest opinion is that sometimes people are put into managers' positions because it's the next logical step in a career.
Yeah.
But they are not people managers. They don't know how to manage people. Yeah. They don't know how to have the conversations, or they come at it as, oh, this is extra work, or it's that, well, if you're going to be off, I can't remember who I was working for. It's probably a good thing. But I've had like 40 different jobs in my career so far. And they used to always tell you the cost impact of any time that you had off. And that used to make me feel awful, especially from like a mental health perspective as well. It was, do you realize when you were off for these days, you've cost the company this much? This is the burden you've put on the rest of your team because you weren't here. They've had to pick up the slack for you not being here.
Wow.
And that was, to me, I couldn't believe it was allowed to happen. Yeah. But I also don't think that ignoring it and just saying, okay, you were off, now you're back. Some people don't even do the return to work policies properly. They don't do check-ins with individuals, or they don't believe you when you do tell them what it is, or you're afraid to tell them the real reasons behind why you might not be there. And thinking of it again from a neurodivergent perspective, some people don't understand the challenges that you're facing, or to the degree that they are, or you could say, I'm finding things really overwhelming. Well, we're all overwhelmed. It's a really busy period, but it impacts people differently. So I think the one thing I've learned is that it's not just a quick fix. It's a part of a manager's process on a day-to-day basis. Embed it into process to have those conversations. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And then if you notice these different things, I've noticed lately that you've been coming in a little bit late. Is everything okay?
And it has to be factual, doesn't it? I mean, you can't just say, I think I've seen you slope in late. It needs to be, I noticed on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, is there something particular that's going on? But it's having that permission to ask the questions.
And it's the relationship between the manager and the individual as to how that conversation will go, because I often get asked, but it really depends on your relationship with the individual on how that conversation will go. So it's building that trust, that psychological safety with the individuals in your team to have those conversations. Sometimes just reminding people of the boundaries of their role, like these are the expectations. Sometimes they're not very clear, so people can maybe be a little bit lenient on some of them. Different managers will have different perspectives. So it could be that one manager was okay with you being late and you make the time up, and then this other manager's really rigid and you've got to be in on the exact minute and finish at the exact time or work later. So
but it sounds like an education piece of line managers as well, though, because they're not all going to be able to do it.
They need education on that.
Sorry, Martin.
And we do work with a company that's brilliant at doing that. And my answer is actually any unusual behaviour that's consistently unusual is what you're looking for. But in terms of actually making managers aware, there is a company called Ripple and Company that we work on who are just outstanding at it. And not Ripple, the suicide charity, who I'm also a big fan of, but the Ripple and Company just know how to do that in a better way than anybody else I've seen do it, in my personal opinion, and in the opinion of people that I hear and respect. So
no, brilliant
it's
to
worth
hear
a
that
look at.
Definitely. So I wanted to, with sort of 6 minutes left, I wanted to sort of look at a whole panel reflection, if we may. So I wanted to open this all up to all of you about what is the biggest hurdle, do you think, to tackling stigma and creating real cultural change around mental health? So what do you think is the biggest hurdle? Martin, is there a single hurdle?
Well, it goes back to that bit at the beginning. I am focused because I've got, we're a company mostly of therapists. That's not my gig. I let them get for that bit. My thing is, how do we actually get people in the workplace to go and fund it? And it is accepting the unmet need is there. And every data point that everybody's given on this early on exemplifies that. But if you only get the person to come out and go, as somebody did from a meeting in Australia of peer group CEOs, the CEO of our partner is part of a bigger group, and the CEO of another company came out and said, well, we've got no problem with mental health because our EAP usage is only 1%.
Oh, wow.
And she just went, okay, well, it is to get to the 60. He genuinely thought that was fantastic. Okay. Unfortunately, she was in an environment to take him offline and give him the figures. So that is the single place to start, as far as I'm concerned, to get somebody to recognize that if they've got 3, 4, 5% of people and they're getting some mental health treatment, that is not the same as getting to the unmet need, which is this many people who need to actually get something that enables them to get better.
Yeah, for sure. Can I just interrupt myself here with a question that we've got from an anonymous? I've worked in HR for 5 years. I can't read the rest of it, apologies, but asking around neurodivergent issues, but getting diagnoses for different neurodivergence. Is there anything, Abigail, that we do around that?
Yeah, so we can have conversations with individuals and basically just ask questions about what somebody's experiencing, and then provide them with the right support following off the back of that as well. But it can be really tricky, but the one thing that we can do is we can have that conversation whether there is a diagnosis or not, and be able to see what that support looks like. Because I think sometimes what tends to happen is people seem to feel like somebody needs a diagnosis before they can start getting the right support, but it's really what are the challenges they're facing and what can we put in place. And sometimes it doesn't cost a thing. It's tweaks and small changes that you can make to somebody's work life, or indeed within the education as well, that can make a huge impact and actually release some of that load on that mental stress that somebody can be facing as well. That's
Thanks, Abigail.
As quick as I can get, because I know we're minutes from the end.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Ali, for a really quick question, if you've got a company that's just starting on this journey, what would be your best piece of advice?
Do what none of us have suggested so far. Why don't you actually ask your employees what would make them feel comfortable using a mental health, emotional wellbeing service? What would make them feel uncomfortable? And then go and find a provider that can tick those boxes. Get that provider to run a pilot, then give the results of that pilot and the measurables to the money people, because as Martin said, that's where the buck stops. If it costs them money, they'll do something about it. We can all say, oh, it's mental health, we should. Yeah, lovely, right? The reality is it's money. So get the individual to say why they're not using the service at the moment. It's not confidential. It's rubbish. Talking to a nice therapist doesn't do it. It doesn't work with my job. Whatever it is, it's not neurodivergent friendly. Get that feedback and then put proper tenders out. Can you genuinely hit this? Can you prove it? If you can't, do one, because we're serious about changing what's happening in the workplace.
I love that sage advice. Thank you,
and
Ali.
A happy workforce is a productive workforce. So,
and that's a cliche for a reason, isn't it, Abigail? I love that. So just to really say thank you to Martin and Ali and Abigail, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We've heard about myths, we've heard about proactive approaches, resilience models, digital solutions and practical adjustments that you can make. We've got Thrive, Ollie and his superpowers, and obviously Microlink, that we will send out information and signpost resources for you after, whether you were able to attend or you're listening to the recording later. And don't forget to join us for our next webinar in the series, Creating Environments That Work for Everyone, on October 30th. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.